Hi, we're going to teach you the Univah Film Engine in 1 hour. Let's get started. Section 1, 6 minutes. We're going to use the library to set up a scene. Download Univah Lite to follow along with me. Everything that you see us doing in this video, you can do in the Univah Lite software. All right, in the material editor, we have our anti-aliasing. We can increase it, we can decrease it, and we can also turn it off altogether. When we switch styles to physically based rendering, underneath it, you're going to see a PBR tab. Expand this tab. Here, you can change the PBR settings globally for the entire scene. Very important to remember, everything you're doing here in this PBR tab in the material editor affects the entire scene. These are called the global settings. So here, we can increase the IBL intensity. We can change the image-based lighting rotation, which affects the lighting of the scene. And all of that is global, okay? So keep that in mind. To add another object to the scene, just go to the library. And in my case, I've actually rearranged my library and I've docked it to the left. Yours is probably at the bottom. So just double click on any of these FBX models and it will be added to the scene. Very easy, right? Very simple. So let's practice adding some 3D models to the scene. In my case, I've added the cliff. I've now added one of the boulders. And we're just going to continue adding more objects to the scene. I'm also going to select the plane and I'm going to expand it so that we have a bit more of a ground area. There we go. Also, keep in mind that some of these 3D models come with several levels of detail. You don't need all of them. It just takes up memory and it takes up space. So go ahead and delete all the other LODs and just keep one, the one that you plan to use. There we go. So back in the library, you're going to see that all the objects that have this orange 3D cube as a icon, if you see an object with an orange 3D cube, that means that's an FBX model or an OBJ model. Basically, it's a 3D model that you can add to the scene. So just double click that and it will show up in the scene. In this case, I've added this cliff twice and I'm going to actually upscale the second cliff so that we have more of this nice dramatic cliffy effect. You've seen me do this in other videos, so by now you should be pretty proficient in how to scale up and use the 3D gizmos. Okay, great. So now I've added another 3D model from the Univah library. And again, all you have to do is download the Univah Lite software and you will have all of these models already in the Univah Lite library. So you can follow along with me in this video. Okay, great. So we're adding objects, we're repositioning objects, we are scaling objects, and that's basically the foundation of how to import objects and rearrange them in a scene. Okay, great. If you're happy with it, you can keep those. Whatever you don't want, you can just go back to the outliner, click on the little checkbox next to the item to show or hide, or you can delete the item altogether. For memory reasons, it's always great to not rely on show and hide. If you don't need something in a scene, actually just delete it. It clears up the memory and it makes the software faster. If you use show and hide, that frees up some of the memory, but it doesn't clear it up altogether. So please keep in mind, for performance reasons, whatever you don't absolutely need in the scene, just go ahead and delete it to clear up the memory, okay? Now we've added a character to our scene, and we are going to go ahead and duplicate this character using Control F So in Univah, to duplicate, it's Control F. In most softwares, it is Control D to duplicate. But because the Univah Film Engine uses the WASD keys for navigation, we didn't want to also use Control D for duplicate. So we do Control F instead. So to duplicate a character, Control F. So now we have two of the same. I'm going to go ahead and just apply another texture to the second object so that we have two characters but with different clothing. And these are 8K textures. So they're very high quality textures. Okay, great. Contact shadows are shadows that show up on contact. They're very, very important to add depth and realism to a scene. This concludes section 1. We've set up a scene. Now, in section 2, we're going to edit PBR materials. 6 minutes. Let's get started. Now, before we get started, let's go ahead and actually change the color of the ground plane. We're going to make it like a blackish, dark gray, That looks better. Now, we can click on the bicycle because I want to teach you guys now the importance of creating your 3D assets with real-time rendering in mind. So, a lot of times, people that are used to using legacy software, because legacy software is not real-time, they create their 3D models and it's not optimized for real-time software. So, understanding the Univah workflow is really going to help 3D modelers when they create their assets. So I want you to pay attention to how I'm going to edit these PBR materials for this bicycle, including the limitations of this 3D model. And based on the limitations of this 3D model, it's going to actually limit how realistic we can make this bicycle look. So Univah comes with all the PBR materials necessary to make anything look realistic. However, if the 3D model and the textures that come with the 3D model are missing or not complete, then we are not going to be able to really edit the model in the way that we can. So now, what you see me doing is I'm editing the materials such as metallicness, roughness, specular. We're also editing anisotropic. We're editing all these different PBR materials. Now, it's super important that when you create your 3D models, you actually go ahead and create each object individually. So if you have the chain for the bicycle, make sure the chain is an individual object that you can edit by itself. If we're not able to select the chain and edit the chain by itself, then we're not going to be able to click on it and then make that chain metallic. So that's super important. When you create these 3D models for real-time rendering, make sure that you select each object, make each object selectable, such as the chain being different from the tires. Because right now we have this one model and it comes as one unit, which means the tire, which is supposed to be rubber, is now going to look metallic and shiny, and it should not, you see. So whereas the body of the bicycle should be metallic, and the chain should be metallic, and even the pedal where you put your feet, that should be metallic. But the little rubber on the handlebar, that should be rubber, you see. So let's make sure that when we create these 3D models, we are not making them all one unit, because we have to edit these models and we have to change the textures and the materials for each of these. And that's what makes it realistic, okay? So keep that in mind when you're creating your 3D models for real-time software. All right. The same goes for the cell phone. With the cell phone, we can make it as realistic as the 3D modeler intended it to be. If it's not very specific, meaning each individual item inside the phone, like for instance, This can be very realistic if you made the screen of the phone separate from the rest of the phone. The camera, the little cameras on the back of the phone, you want to make that selectable. You want to make it separate. Why? Because then in Univah, we can click on each of these components and we can edit it. We can make videos. We can add videos to the screen. We can change the textures on the screen. And we can still do those things, but it's going to be much harder. We would have to do it ourselves now inside of Univah. So when you're creating your 3D models for real-time rendering, especially given the fact that Univah works based on very precise selectable objects, make sure that you create your models and whatever parts of the models need to be, edited separately, make sure we can select it. Don't just take the whole model and make it like one thing. You see what I mean? So those are some of the limitations of this 3D model, but we're doing the best we can with what we have. So just keep that in mind moving forward. And polygon count, keep that in mind moving forward when creating for real-time software such as the Univah Film Engine. Okay, you really want to utilize physically based materials like normal maps, displacement maps, diffuse maps. Okay, very important. It saves a lot of memory. Okay, so there we go. You can see that I have changed the PBR materials for one bicycle, and it looks drastically different from the other bicycle, which I am intentionally leaving flat. So you can see the difference. This concludes section 2. We are now in section 3, which is real world lighting. Let's get started. So far, we have edited some PBR materials. We've set up a scene. Now we need to light this scene. Currently, we have one directional light in the scene. We're going to turn it off. Now, with that light off, what you're seeing is the ambient light coming from the image-based lighting that we have loaded on the scene by default. Okay, so when you purchase Univah and you launch Univah, by default, it comes with an image-based lighting that is loaded. Okay, you can of course change that lighting, but this is what you're seeing right now in the scene. The intensity of that light is there. I typically leave it at about 1. Now, exposure. If you know nothing about photography, real world photography, then exposure on a camera is what allows the light to come into a camera. So we're going to increase this exposure only for your benefit, only for your benefit. Typically, I never go above 1.6 for exposure. I never go above 1.6 for exposure, but I'm doing this for your benefit so you can see what it does. Now, that high of an exposure plus adding back the directional light, you can see the scene looks washed out because the directional light in 3D software represents the sun. The sun in Univah is using real world units such as watts for intensity. So now you can see that the scene really is only going to look good with that directional light turned off. Okay, so let's go back and put the exposure way back down to about 1.6. At about 1.6, that is a good place to keep it. Like I said, I hardly ever go above 1.6. Now, we add back the directional light. The intensity by default is on 10 watts. That is very bright. It is a directional light. We can decrease that to 3 so that we get that natural feel that you guys like. You compliment my renders all the time and you say, my renders look amazing. Well, that's because I understand lighting. So with the directional light, set the intensity down to 3. Okay, at 3 for the directional light. Again, this is for the directional light only. Okay, the directional light is the brightest of all lights in all 3D software. Okay, and this is based on real world lighting. The sun is the brightest light. There is nothing brighter than the sun, and that is what the directional light is. So keep that in mind. So don't go and add a spotlight or a point light and then add it to a 3 intensity and wonder why you can't see it. The reason you can't see it is because a spotlight or a point light or an area light are not as bright or as intense as a directional light. Those are much weaker lights, meaning they need a much higher intensity. Okay? All right. Now, I'm adding some fog here. You can see we have some atmospheric effects now, some volumetric effects now. And what's really cool about the software is that you don't just add these elements, you can edit these elements. So we have these volumetric fog that we can edit in real time, and you can animate this as well. So as you edit these properties, you can animate just about anything that you can edit in Univah. So that's the great thing about our software. It's fantastic. Now I think it's a good time, since we are working with lighting. What I typically do is I also like to do some renders, because seeing some final renders helps me, you know, I just like it. And so let's go ahead and create our first render. Given we have some fog and we've changed our lighting a bit, let's see how a final render of this scene would look. And this is something we could send to a client. A client could then say, hey, I like the lighting, but maybe change it a bit, change the light direction a bit. And then we can simply change that, re-render in seconds instead of hours. So that's the power of Univah. In any other software, you create a render, it takes maybe 2 days. Send it to a client, the client wants to make a change, then you have to render for another 2 days before you send the client another revision. So here with Univah, everything is instant. You send this to a client, the client doesn't like it, they want to make a change. You make that change instantly, re-render another image instantly, send it to the client the same day. So that's the great thing about this software, working with real-time software that has final pixel rendering in the viewport. There is no longer any guessing. There is no longer any let's wait 2 days and see, because now we have the ability to see the final pixel, the final quality in real time while we're working. And that is revolutionary. Okay, this is some next gen type of stuff. Okay, this is great. If I do say so myself, this is the way every single artist wants to work. Okay, there is not a single artist in the universe that would prefer to work in a slower way than what we're proposing here. Alrighty, so we have some test renders. It's looking good. It's looking good. We have our contact shadows. The contact shadows are really doing it. They're adding a lot of contact where the bicycle hits the floor. You see that? Yes. And why is this important? This is super important because right now, you don't know this, but right now I'm actually recording this video on a university computer, and it doesn't have dedicated graphics. So to any of you at home who love the Univah Film Engine, but you don't have dedicated graphics, what you can do, if your shadows are not showing, if you add a directional light, point light, area light, and your shadows are not showing, it's because you don't have a dedicated GPU. So what we did to combat that is we gave you these contact shadows, and you can use these contact shadows even on a computer that does not have a dedicated GPU. And you'll be able to see some shadows rather than not having any shadows at all. So again, to get the full power of Univah, you do need a dedicated GPU. However, if you're using integrated graphics, shared GPU, shared graphics, then you can use the contact shadows to see some sort of depth in the scene. Okay. Alternatively, you can also just use AI. There are lots of AI tools, including even Nano Banana. So you can render something in Univah. If you have if you don't have a dedicated GPU and you're not able to see shadows, then just render out the scene. Take your scene and take your image, import it to Nano Banana, and say, hey, Nano Banana, please add shadows. And it's going to do that for you. Yes, that's the kind of generation we live in now. So there's really no excuse. So even if you don't have the money to buy an expensive dedicated GPU, Nano Banana is very cheap, it's very affordable, and you can add shadows that way. If you are some sort of After Effects wizard or Photoshop wizard, you can also do it in Photoshop. But I mean, why do that when Nano Banana can do it in seconds? So yes, so that's what you see here. It's really, really great. What we've done so far, we've edited some lighting. We have shown you how to add new lights. We added a directional light. We added a point light. We moved the point light around. Keep in mind For those of you who may be very new to 3D, directional lights are the sun. You cannot move it around. Section 4, rendering and subsurface scattering. This is basically the last section of this video. We hope that you have been following along so far using Univah Light. Again, everything you see us doing here, you can do in Univah Light, and you can actually recreate this exact scene using these exact assets. All of these assets come with the Univah Light software. Okay? All right. So, what I typically like to do before I create a final render, especially if I have humans in the scene, is I like to add a bit of subsurface scattering. Now, by default, the skin is going to be very pinkish, which is good for Caucasian skin. But for black skin, you want to make sure that you change that color to like a brown. So that's what you've seen me do there. So I've changed the color to a brownish. And so right there where you see skin, that is what's going to give it that subsurface scattering look. And again, depending on how you light the scene, this can look very interesting. Okay. So as you can see, I'm playing with the roughness there. But we're not rendering something like Toy Story or Barbie, so it doesn't need to be shiny. So we're rendering human skin, so we want to make sure that roughness is very, very high. Okay, to an almost 1 for roughness. Okay, all right. We don't want waxy looking skin, you know. So this is not a game engine, it's a film engine. It needs to look real. So, all right. So these are some techniques that a lot of people, unfortunately, because most people have been using game engines, they have been kind of taught the wrong things, and we have to like unteach them to teach them the right way. So your skin should not be waxy. You shouldn't be using too much roughness. I see so many CG artists, their renders look like renders because they have so much roughness. Things look so plasticky, very shiny, you know, just doing too much with the PBR. And whereas realism, the key to realism is understanding less is more. Use less than what you think you need. So don't go overboard with the roughness. Don't go overboard with the metallicness. Don't go overboard. Okay. All right. Now, the reason our renders look so natural, as you guys have said, which is what makes our quality higher than any game engine, this naturalness, is because I understand that there's a huge difference between getting a game-looking render and getting a render that can pass for photography, real-life photography. Okay, so we have to do some things differently, and that's what we're doing here. Okay, so I've added some very basic but very effective subsurface scattering to these two guys, okay? And you don't only do this for human skin, guys. You do this for water. Subsurface scattering is very useful for water, for candles, for even some fruits like lemons, you know. It just really depends on what you want to convey with your render, okay? Alrighty. So now that we have these guys looking a little bit more alive, thanks to subsurface scattering, we need to change our lighting because the lighting of the scene does not match these guys. So right now these guys are very bright and the scene is kind of darkish. So we need to create sort of like a broad daylight type of scene. And in order to do that, we need to change our sun angle to where it's directly above us. So direct midday sunlight. And to do that, the cheat code to that is just to type 90. If you type 90 degrees at the top and 0 at the bottom, you get that direct sunlight being like directly above you, like what you would get from a broad daylight type of time zone, right? So, okay. Now we have lighting that matches these guys and their skin. Okay, good. So it looks very natural. It looks very natural. Okay. Lighting is key, guys. That's why majority of the time you're going to spend a lot of time on lighting. lighting and texturing, materials, PBR, all that stuff, you're going to spend a lot of time on that because that is what determines how good the render is. So, this is the part of the video where I show you proof that our software runs on integrated graphics. We are using an Intel UHD 770 shared GPU, and it's not a dedicated graphics card. Hence why you don't see shadows. I have to use the contact shadows so that you can see something. Okay, so I'm showing you this so that you can see I'm still able to create high fidelity scenes even though I'm not using a dedicated GPU. Okay, so that's awesome. Alrighty. We're also going to go ahead and bring that image-based lighting back since I have switched to the sketch mode and sketch rendering, which is my favorite because it looks like Avatar, The Last Airbender from Nickelodeon, right? So that's the quality that we wanted to give you here in real time. I'm going to create a final render of this sketch scene, and you're going to see that it looks so beautiful. It's so pretty. We have a 4K sketch render, and it looks like something that was made by Nickelodeon. This looks like a scene from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, it really does. It legitimately can pass for a Nickelodeon TV show. Okay, so that is awesome. That is awesome. And I like it. I like it so much. It's my favorite rendering style. Okay. And we're like the only software that has this because we wrote it specifically. It's a very unique shader that we wrote. Yeah, so that's awesome. And so let's go ahead now and do what most people tend to do is they create several renders, and we are going to do that right now. So we're going to switch from style to style, and we're going to render out an image to send to the client. So let's render this rendering style. This is our no outline rendering style, which is a cross between PBR and not PBR. So we send this to the client. The client has also a rendering of sketch mode. Now they have a rendering of no outline. We're going to also render out architecture. You see how easy this is to create all these different renders. And if you wanted to do different render passes for compositing, very easy. Very, very easy. Okay, great. So we have that rendering. And let's also we're not going to do paint because paint is special. We only use paint for very special reasons, literally for paint reasons. Let's do wireframe, which is wonderful. I love wireframe rendering. Don't ask me why, I just think it's so cool. Wireframe rendering is how you prove that your rendering is a rendering. So when people are like, there's no way this is a rendering, just show them the wireframe. They're like, oh, okay. Okay, cool. All right. So I'm super excited. This is great. These are all the different rendering styles, and we're switching with one click. Look how beautiful that is. We went from wireframe to sketch to full PBR with one click. The final section, which concludes this video, is for motion graphics. This is where we're going to create a motion graphics effect in real time with this fidelity, and it's going to be awesome. And this is really where you start to see the power of the Univah Film Engine, because we can add anything that we want to the scene. We can add a full water scene that renders like realistic water that blows everyone away. We can create a tsunami right now. We can create a motion graphic effect right now with this fidelity, with these characters. We can add physics right now. We can have physics, and we can have, we can destroy anything. Okay, we have destruction physics where you just drop a bowl and it breaks into pieces. We can do so much. We can do so much, and it's all thanks to Nvidia library. We're using the Nvidia physics library, which comes with all of these features for destruction physics. And it comes with really amazing stuff for like gases. So, yes, we are implementing that in the Univah Film Engine. And that is why we wanted to share this with NVIDIA, because I think NVIDIA would be really happy to see what people are doing with some of their technology, with some of their libraries, to see how their graphics cards are being used uh, and utilized by emerging technology. And so we thank the wonderful guys at NVIDIA who made the physics library and continue to upkeep that library, because we are going to use it so hard all night long, and it's going to be awesome. And so we thank you so much for all of your help. And now we're just going to play around until this video is over. There's about 6 minutes left. I'm going to be silent and let you watch the rest in peace. Thank you for watching. Share this with everyone, including your mom. Okay, don't leave her out. You guys never share things with your mom. Okay, share it with your mom. She probably wants to make her first motion graphics effect. You know, she probably just doesn't know how to use Cinema 4D, but she will learn to do it in Univah, because Univah is easier than Cinema 4D. Okay, so share this with your mom. Share with your daddy. You know, share with your dad. Why don't you want to tell your dad? You know, so just tell your family. Tell everybody. Tweet it. Put it on LinkedIn. Don't be scared. Okay. Have the confidence to share the things that you love. Okay. That's called confidence. Do you know that there are some people that are so insecure they can't even share their music taste in public? They're so insecure. They have to look around and they get so insecure and they're like, oh my gosh, I wonder if person A over there is going to like my taste in music. Oh, I can't share it. I put my headphones on, you know. And it's really sad, you know. It's really sad when I see people like that, because if you can't even share your music taste, and it's like, sweetie, you know, what chance do you have in life with anything else, you know? It takes a lot of confidence to be how we are. So I hope you guys appreciate that. To those of you who find it difficult to even share your music taste, try being me. Alrighty. Well, anyway, I've got to go. Bye-bye.